start out with a game, and I believe it is on my phone. I can ask some of these questions. Give me just one moment to see. I had it ready, but I will say you can stay seated, so kids or adults are welcome to stay seated there either way. But give me just a second. I'll ask a couple of these questions while my phone's figuring out if it wants to pull the actual thing up right away. But this is going to be, is it in the Bible? So we're looking through a series on picturing the power of the Bible, or picturing the power of God through the miracles in the Bible. And we're up to, I'm not going to say the miracle of the flood. I would say it's much more accurate to say the miracles of the flood. And we can think, well, yeah, okay, a bunch of water, but that's kind of a sad thing. Hope you'd agree. Right now, or at least by the end of the night, God was doing a whole lot. Some of it was miraculous and absolutely worth taking a look at. We can picture so much about God in that. Well, so what we're going to get started with is a lot of people's beliefs about the flood come from the Bible, and a lot, frankly, don't. So we'll look at the Bible, a little bit of science on how that gets confirmed. So, in the Bible or not? In the Bible or not? Guy getting his hair stuck in a tree and being shot with arrows while he was hanging from a tree. In the Bible or not? Yes, in the Bible. Can you name who it was? Absalom. How about a bold military campaign involving elephants? It's hard to argue with that. I was thinking war campaign, so let me be more specific. No, Hannibal and I believe others did charge over some mountains and different things, and it's definitely historical, not recorded in the Bible. How about a man being eaten by worms? Oh, that one's got it divided a little bit. I hear a couple people pretty confidently saying no, a couple people confidently saying yes. Anybody name the guy in the Bible? It is yes. Yeah, John was going to say. Are y'all like good enough with your Herods to say which one? Neither am I. There was Herod the Tetrarch and this Herod and that Herod. Two Pauls in the Bible. I can keep them straight. Or two Sauls, excuse me. One becomes Paul. I can keep them straight usually. But anyway, how about talking animals? Did someone say Noah? Well, Noah was not a talking animal. I believe I can think, I know I can think of two in the Bible. Anybody think of any of, maybe more than two? I don't know. Can anybody think of a specific time there was a talking animal? So we got the donkey. Addison, is that what you were going to say? And the serpent. So I got, Balaam's donkey and the serpent, Satan talking through the serpent. Can you think of any others? I can't. Yeah, I don't know that there were any others in the Bible. Those are pretty awesome ones there. Well, as we look at the flood, and before the kids are dismissed, we're going to look at some pictures just to start to introduce this. But I hope we'll realize that as amazing as it was, as not something we ever will see again, the Bible has something to say about that. Some people wonder why there aren't, we've never seen a global flood. Why not? Well, God said there would only be the one. But some people say, oh, it couldn't be. We don't see them now, so it couldn't be back then. I hope we'll realize the Bible is very, very clear. And I will say science backs that up. So I want to just, kind of like we did a few weeks ago with creation message, I love looking at science, looking at history a little bit, and looking at the pictures. So I thought I'd kind of go through these quickly, and then we'll dismiss Jen with the kids there. But some people will say, well, there's no way the Bible could be right. There's no way that all of those animals could have fit on the ark. Mr. Glenn, do you have a picture of a dinosaur, a small dinosaur to put up? So, sorry, not a picture, Brooklyn. I might have misspoken. Some will be like, oh, how did all the dinosaurs fit? Well, do you know there was a dinosaur called a Compsognathus that's its size compared to a normal-sized person? I've seen an artist's rendition of that guy riding a skateboard. Obviously not real. I'm sure they didn't write that was not in the fossil remains. But some dinosaurs were really small. Dinosaurs it's believed that they grew until they died. That, we don't. Anybody wish they'd just grow taller their whole life? You live to be 120, you're like 18 feet tall. I don't know. That might get a little weird. I always joke that if that were the case, You can go see your grandkids if you have grandkids, and they'll be like, you can say, "Wow, how you've grown," but they could look at you, "My granny, how you've grown," that kind of thing. That might be fun. I don't know. But somebody has calculated out all of the different kinds of animals that would have been needed, because it's not every species, it's every kind in the Bible that would have been needed on the ark. And the average size of the animals on the ark would have been about the size of a sheep. Not that big. And in fact, Mr. Glenn, you can put up the picture of the ark in the next slide there. This is not Noah's. This is Ken Ham's, if you want to go there. But again, through detailed study by him and others, that is in Kentucky. And those are people. I wanted to use that picture. Jen, I looked for the one with us. I couldn't find it. I looked at your Facebook and mine. Jen and I have been there. Yeah, I didn't start the search early enough, sorry. But yeah, you can go through there and tour it. Some great interactive exhibits, awesome stuff out there in Kentucky. But they were meticulous on, they believe that is the size of it. And by the way, that almost tail design facing us there would be an amazing stabilizer. Some people wonder, well, how could the ark have fit everything? Yeah, I used to joke that I think Noah had a basketball court. There was so much room. Anybody say why they think there was so much room on the ark? Because the animals did not fill all of it. Who else was invited to come on the ark? Everyone. Now, I'm not going to say there was room for everyone. God would have made that big of a boat if he knew everyone would have repented. But let's be honest. If he knew everyone was going to repent, he wouldn't have bothered with the ark. He wouldn't have sent the flood. So there were, and we'll talk about it briefly at least, but there was room for a lot of people to get on the ark. God shut the door, and then a week later or so, the rain started. I heard one preacher saying he believes if someone would have repented in that week before the flood actually started, God would have opened the door. Such a picture. That's part of the amazing thing that is the miracles of the flood. It's God's mercy. It's, yes, God's judgment, but it's God's mercy on display in so many ways. It's God's amazing mercy that he didn't wipe everyone out. Maybe you had a parent that threatened you that they brought you into the world and they could take you out and make another one just like you. Well, God actually could. He could have restarted completely, and he didn't. Just an amazing thing. But again, just the size of the ark, it's been estimated to have the capacity, the volume of 512 railroad cars. You ever wait and count trains as you're sitting there at over 500. Massive. Again, maybe church trip sometime. That'd be amazing to go see it. It is worth seeing. It's pretty awesome. And then some will say, okay, well, if there was a global flood, which I absolutely believe it was a global flood, we'll go into it more, but the Bible's clear, science is clear. People will say, you foolish Christians, how can you believe that there was a global flood? Where's the evidence? Well, that could fill books, and it has, and all. But let's look at a few. That's a picture of a fossil graveyard. So those are fossilized dead animals. You can say ooh if you want to. I don't know. But they have found massive fossil graveyards, more than one, many of them, and hundreds, I believe even thousands of animals buried together, almost as if maybe they were fleeing to the highest ground they could find, and they got buried rapidly. You think about the flood. Would there have been some mud flows and mudslides? Yeah, it's buried fast. By the way, fossils don't form, you know this, but fossils don't form unless they get buried fast. Most bones don't get fossilized. And yet we see huge amounts. Animals that eat each other, by the way. They're not hanging out together under normal circumstances. And you can look at fossil. I just pulled up. I didn't even spend a lot of time looking for just the right picture, because you don't need just the right picture to see. No. These are all over the place. Some of these are from secular sources. They have the science. They just need to realize that it confirms the Bible. Fossil graveyards are one proof. I think the next picture is just one of many times where scientists and people that don't believe the Bible scratch their head and say, why are there fossils on the mountains? So those are both kind of found in the Himalayas. There are sea creatures found on Mount Everest. And they try to come up with some different explanations that are pretty funny. Honestly, everything was underwater. Now, I'll be the first to tell you, Mount Everest grows every year, 2 inches. It's 2 inches taller every year. I believe tectonic plates pushing together. It grows. So I think when the fountains of the Great Deep broke up, the valleys, the Marianas Trench and all that got deeper, and the mountains got taller, but every bit of the earth was covered. And they find the proof right there. And it's just kind of funny. It's heartbreaking that they won't admit what it is. Mr. Glenn, my notes, I think I've got some rock layers on the next slide. Some will say, well, why don't we find more evidence of the flood? Well, I think the top, it might be the Grand Canyon, but a canyon with all those rock layers, right? And they'll say, well, 1 year equals 1 layer. Do you know there is a canyon? I don't think I have a picture of it up, but there's a canyon that formed in 6 days, and I believe it's over 50 feet tall. It was actually when Mount St. Helens erupted. I'll have to show, if you've never seen video of that, you really should. I can show that sometime. It's on YouTube and all, but it's 40% of a mountain just gone. My understanding is the ash from that eruption, I believe it was in the 80s, came even up in the atmosphere and affected the weather here in Pennsylvania. I believe it did. So my parents were living in PA at the time. Oh, the Dakotas. Yeah, I can only, and you were in the Air Force, if I'm not mistaken. No. Yeah. So in that, it basically dammed up a creek, and then a little while later, and it forms all these sediment layers. A little while later, in 6 days, this creek carves out this canyon. It formed in 6 days. So people will say, well, the Colorado River must have taken millions of years to carve out the Grand Canyon. What if it wasn't a little water in a long time? What if it was a lot of water in a little time? And in fact, there's a lot of really, really good evidence, including right there. But what I wanted these pictures up for, there are layers of rock that stretch between continents. They're under multiple continents. So that had to be covered at the same time with the same murky, muddy water. And in fact, evolutionists, many of them, are throwing away their idea of uniformitarianism. There's no floods now. There couldn't have been floods back then. Some evolutionists believe in 3 floods. They made fun of Christians for believing in 1. Now they believe in 3. They're making it up as they go. I hope and pray, and many of them do. I hope and pray they'll get there someday. When I watched Ken Ham debate Bill Nye, Bill Nye, the science guy, neat guy. It's sad that he's an evolutionist, but they had a debate in the Ark, I believe it was, at least on site there somewhere. But Ken Ham a couple times said, hey, Bill, there's a book out there that explains exactly how everything came from nothing. There's a book out there that explains all this. And everywhere we look in the Bible, everywhere we look in science, there's so much evidence. There are areas, I think I've shared this before, where evolutionists say, well, over millions of years, this layer formed, and then this one, and then this one. And there are areas where those entire things are upside down. Well, muddy slurry of global water, couldn't that happen? Well, yeah, it did, in fact. But what, over here, this evolved into that, and over here, it's the other way around? Are you kidding? Let me just share this. Again, this is math, science, and Bible all collide into creation science, and so I've dug in and enjoyed it for years and years. But evolutionists, last I've read anyway, evolutionary scientists can't agree. Do they think that some lizards started jumping up and slowly, over millions of years, developed feathers and became birds? Or did they climb up in a tree and start jumping down and slowly develop feathers? They can't even agree with each other. I think there's a good reason for that. I think I was illustrating so much that the kids left. I don't blame them. Let me share one more picture, and then we'll talk through some scripture and some great applications for us. I don't blame Jen for getting out of here and going through her lesson. That's good. But one more picture. I think it's of another dead animal, one more fossil, one more dead thing to put up. That is an ichthyosaurus, I believe, and I don't know what that guy looked like before he was fossilized, but that animal got fossilized while giving birth. You can look as closely as you want to there and confirm that if you want. But yeah, that doesn't normally happen, would we agree? Yeah, that does. I mean, sadly, animals and sadly even people could die while giving birth, but at the same time, for it to be fossilized takes immediate burial. Because otherwise it's going to rot down, it's going to go away. Ken Ham, I won't be able to say it with the Australian accent he has, or as well as he does, but again, great creation scientist. Again, his organization built the Ark and all of that, and I got some of these pictures from his website, I believe. But he says, well, what would we expect if there was a global flood? Billions of dead things billions of dead things buried by water, laid in rock layers, laid down all over the earth. Again, I can't say it word for word, but billions of dead things buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth. And then he'll say in his Australian accent, what do we see? Billions of dead things buried in rock layers, laid down by water all over the earth. Just the mere existence of rock layers that evolutionists love to point out, oh, that shows that this evolved into the, which it doesn't. But the existence of all those rock layers takes massive amounts of water, like the flood. So we want to kind of, with that backdrop, look at several things with the flood. But again, I want us to keep in mind the most amazing miracle wasn't covering the earth with water. That's a miracle, right? But kind of a sad one, right? But the most amazing miracle to me anyway was that God didn't completely wipe out humanity. His mercy is the most amazing part of his judgment. God's not out to get us. He's out to call us to him. And again, people had become so wicked that even their thoughts, their imaginations, was only evil continually. There was no going back for them. So, and you might say, oh, I don't know. Noah, I believe, preached for over 100 years. Not one convert. I've heard of missionaries that ended up eventually being highly successful. One, if I could remember his name, you'd know him, but he was 8 years on the field. I believe he and his wife, serving faithfully day in, day out, year in, year out, before one person got saved. 8 years. Noah, I believe 120 years. I believe he spent 120 years. There's some debate. I believe he spent 120 years building the ark. I think the Bible's clear. It was 120 years and then the flood would come. But let's be honest, it probably took a little bit to build the ark. And we won't talk about all of that. But everywhere we see God's judgment, we see God's righteousness, we see God's mercy. I love in Genesis 9:13, just skipping to the end, it says, I do set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be for a token of a covenant between me and the earth. Revelation 6:2, we see another rainbow. It says, and I saw and behold a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, a rainbow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Is there some judgment in Revelation? But is there some mercy in Revelation? Absolutely. So when we see God's judgment, that should make us run to his mercy. And even as Christians, we're safe, so to speak. We're saved. We're on our way to heaven. But is there punishment for sin? I can remember talking to somebody, remember hearing a discussion where they were adamant that God does not punish his children ever. Well, you could say he doesn't punish, he brings consequences. But God ever whooped you for something wrong you've done? Yeah. Hope you got better for it. I know many times I have, and it's been actually a blessing in the end. Well, first of all, let's look at a few things. First of all, the miracle that God would care enough to notice and to help. Believe it or not, we'll turn to Genesis 6. You might already have known that, but Genesis 6. And again, we'll just take a quick look. Maybe sometime I'll preach verse by verse through the book of Genesis. That'll take a little bit, but I love the book of Genesis. But in Genesis 6, verse 5, it says, and God saw. Now, we'll talk about what he saw, but isn't it amazing that he takes time to see? Some people fear that God would be up there, yeah, he created us, and then he's just ignoring us. Aren't you glad that he sees? Now, what he saw here was heartbreaking. He saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And he repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth. Not that God changed or anything like that, and it grieved him at his heart. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing and the fowls of the air, for repenteth me that I have made them. But I love that God not only saw that, but Genesis 6, verse 8, but Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. Again, it doesn't say God saw, but Noah found grace in God's eyes. He sees everything. And yes, that should caution us if we have sin in our lives. We need to get that right. But he sees the good. He sees what nobody else notices. He sees what nobody rewards. What seems like it just goes ignored. God sees everything. I love Mark 1:41. Don't turn there, but it says, and Jesus, moved with compassion, put forth his hand and touched him and said unto him, I will, be thou clean. And he healed a man there. Jesus saw the need and was moved with compassion. When God looks at us, he's not looking to condemn us. Now, sin has consequences, and if we reject him, then we've made our choice. But sin is something we can repent of. We can come to God. I love the miracle that God cared enough to notice them, and he loves us enough to notice and to see us. Next, I'm going to look at what I'm going to call the miracle of a warning. Now, you could say, well, that's not a miracle. I think it's pretty miraculous that God would warn us. I think it's pretty miraculous that he would warn Noah and his family, build the ark, get on the ark. And I think it's pretty miraculous that he would have Noah preach, again, probably for 120 years. Get on the boat, get on. I mean, I can only imagine. Picking back up in Genesis 6, verse 11, it says, the earth was also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. For all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. One commentator has said, one pastor, I believe, had said, wickedness is great when great men are wicked. Wickedness is great. It's big. It's huge when great men are wicked. In other words, when we exalt those who are wicked, the wickedness grows. America ever exalt any wicked people? Quite a few, actually. Anything violent in America, that was one of the things. I think God kind of wiped those people out before they wiped each other out in more and more wickedness. But yeah, I would say abortion's pretty violent. And sadly, if you've never watched some of the video of a fetus being aborted, it's, some will describe it as painless. It's not. I've seen some of the footage. It'll never leave your mind if you ever see it. Oh, by the way, with that, I'm not planning to park there for long, but on my desk is an invitation for our church to participate in a Walk for Life with the local pregnancy ministry here in Chambersburg. So I can get that information to you if you'd like to help with a solution there. A wonderful thing. But we see, again, God gives Noah a warning. 2 Peter 2, verse 5 describes, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. Again, that's pretty much the detail we see about his preaching ministry, but a preacher of righteousness. Did he preach the entire time? We don't know for sure. Did he have a hammer in one hand and, preaching with and gesturing with his other hand? I don't know. But I guarantee you, he warned everybody he could. He preached, turn to God, turn to God, turn to God, to everyone he could. I imagine that others than Noah, his sons, and all of their wives, I imagine that other than those 8 people, there were others who helped build the ark. Maybe godly family members who ended up dying of natural causes before the flood. Maybe some workers who they got to, I'm glad you're paying us, Noah, because I'm tired of hearing you preach. If only they would have listened to him. Again, we don't know all the details, but God sent this warning. And it's a warning to us as well. God will never send a global flood again. Hopefully no local flooding with the rain coming in the next 2 days. I wasn't planning that, but I guess that's a nice backdrop for this message. I don't know. Shouldn't be anything like that I know of. But Matthew 24, verses 37 to 39 say, but as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man, at Jesus, be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the days that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. You don't want to know one of the scariest things to me about that passage? As in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. There's nothing wrong with any of that. It says drinking. I don't find that it's necessarily talking about alcohol or anything like that. They're living normal life. They're living good things out and missing the godly. Sometimes it's absolute wickedness, like we saw right before the flood. Sometimes it's absolute wickedness that keeps people away from God, but sometimes it's the good. There's a book, Good to Great, and in it a business leader describes how you can go take your business, take your life, whatever, from good to great. I think we need to focus on making sure we're going from good to godly. There are a lot of good people that are rejecting God. And so we know in an ultimate sense they're not good. None of us are. But at the same time, let's never let the good keep us away from the godly. I've eaten today. I had some things to drink, some water. Trying to drink a lot of it as I'm out in the sun some more there. I've married. 40 years from now, I might have to give my daughters away in marriage. Again, 40 or 50, we'll see, But again, I haven't had that opportunity just yet. May have to push that one out a ways. I don't know. But those normal things of life should never keep our focus from God. In fact, the Bible talks about whatsoever you do, whether you eat or drink, whatsoever you do all to the glory of God. Let's let everything we do be for God. And certainly let's take the warning. Again, judgment is coming, and it's a bigger judgment than the flood. Well, next, absolutely, to me, the biggest deal, the miracle of salvation available to all. The miracle of salvation available to all. Those people could have gotten on the ark. And I've seen some great depictions, some reenactments. I think it's Noah that's playing at Sight and Sound right now. I've seen the video of another performance. I've never seen that Noah live. We'll probably try to go as a family at some point this year. Maybe a church trip. That'd be awesome. But on there, they depict it as the family in the ark, and they can hear the yells and the screams as the waters start to rise. And again, they're very theatrical, very Christian, very skilled at it. But salvation was available to all. Let's be willing to share with everyone we can while there's still time. Yes, they could have spared themselves drowning to death, but let's be honest, drowning to death wasn't really what was at stake. That's bad. Eternity's a bigger deal. Absolutely. Genesis 6, let's read a few more verses. Genesis 6, back in verse 14. God tells Noah, make thee an ark of gopher wood. Rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without with pitch. So some sort of tar there. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make of it. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. Now, how long was a cubit? Anybody want to absolutely answer with confidence? I don't. Okay, I have a number in mind, and I use this number, but I'm not confident because we're not sure. But what would you say? So, yeah, from your finger down to your elbow, you can compare cubits later if you want. Just give everybody a high five and just hold your arms up there. Probably everybody in this room has a slightly different cubit, right? And are we as tall as everyone in Bible times or Noah's day? Well, no. So most people say 18 to 21 inches. But there's a little bit of room. Can you imagine Goliath's cubit? Again, I saw another video of a Florida basketball player. He'll be playing next year, but Olivier Rayo, he's 7'9", tallest guy in college basketball. Cut down the net, I believe, after the championship. He didn't bother with the ladder. He's cutting, I think it was the top loop, pair of scissors in hand, on foot. I mean, crazy. I can only imagine how tall his cubit was. But somewhere around 18 to 21. When estimating Goliath's height, I tend to use 18 inches, just what I kind of go with. But do you know the exact dimensions? We don't know exact length, width, height, other than in cubits. But those ratios are really slow, but unsinkable, virtually. They have used those dimensions in things like barges in modern times. Now, not the exact length, width, and height. I can only imagine if there's ever a huge flood in Kentucky and Ken Ham, the ark that his organization built, actually, set sail. It would go viral, to say the least. Quite a few people would pay attention, but hopefully it'll stay in place. I'm sure it's safe. But they actually use the dimensions, the 300 cubits by 50 by 30, those length, width, height, just ratios in some modern vessels as well. It's not going to win you a speedboat race, but it's going to stay afloat. Very, very strong at floating. And we just see confirmation after confirmation. This is God that wrote it. He's the one that did it. And more could have gotten on there. Again, we looked a little bit at the size of some animals, size of the ark. There was plenty of room. 1 Peter 3:20 says, which sometime were disobedient when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah. Again, God put up with it a long time. He was suffering long. By the way, that's why the rapture hasn't happened yet. Bible's clear. He's long suffering. He wants more people to get saved. That's why the rapture hasn't happened yet. People can say, well, why 2,000 years plus and counting here? He wants more people to come to him. He's long-suffering. But when once the long-suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was a-preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. It was available to all. That temporary salvation on the ark, and through faith in God, everything that pictured. I think it's a miracle, kind of a lighthearted one, but a miracle that the animals came to the ark. Genesis 6:19 says, and of every living thing of all flesh, 2 of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark to keep them alive with thee. Noah's job was to bring them into the ark. I do not think he had to go chase down the kangaroos. You ever seen videos of those guys? I don't think they're joking when they show them boxing with each other. I've not been around kangaroos much, but those guys, they're vicious. Again, I think God miraculously brought them there. Some will say, well, how did the lions not eat the zebras and all of that? I believe God not only called Noah to do this, but God helped Noah do this, and of course his family. Was there a special kind of almost hibernation for some different types of animals? I would say probably. The Bible doesn't say, but yeah. I mean, it's weird that people want a completely natural explanation for supernatural things. If God can flood the entire earth, can't God take care of some animals? And people will say, well, how did Noah gather them all? Well, he had 120 years. He could have done it with God's help without a miracle if God wanted him to. But I think God brought the animals there. I personally, you can debate this later, and I'm perfectly fine if you do. I do believe in the supercontinent Pangea being there. I think when the fountains of the great deep broke up, I think that puzzle, if you've ever looked at how continents can kind of fit together, I think that puzzle kind of split apart. By the way, there's evidence that Earth's magnetic field has switched multiple times in history. North-south pole, they've switched more than once in history. Yeah, all that spreading out, all those rocks, yeah, it would do something to the magnetic field for sure. I think going back to the flood and all of that probably had quite a bit to do with it. So God helped them. Some will say, okay, you foolish Christians, how can you believe the Bible? After the flood, all the land animals, they're all there on one boat. They get off. And how did kangaroos get to Australia? And how did these other animals? Well, there was a little bit of a unique water situation at that point, right? First and foremost, Pangea might not have split apart completely yet. Does describe Peleg, and his days the land was divided, I believe is how it's worded, or similar to that. So maybe it was a little bit after there. It all spreads out a lot more. But I do believe that all of that water evaporating, some came from underneath, some came from up above, all that water evaporating led to massive cooling. And if you're like, well, how does that work? Well, you ever sweat, and as it evaporates, it cools you off? Some of you don't sweat as much as me, and you're glad for that, but you get the idea. Well, all that water, I believe it did lead to an ice age. I don't know if you've ever heard a creationist or a pastor say they believe in the ice age, but it was real. I don't think there was a little squirrel named Scrat, or whatever that squirrel in that movie's name is. My daughters were watching a little bit of that ice age. Anyway, we have fun explaining, okay, it didn't work exactly like this, but I believe there was about a 700-year period, not millions of years, about 700 years, where glaciers were more widespread. And then the weather system all evened out. You want proof? You ever heard of the Battle of Bunker Hill? What state? Yep, Boston, Massachusetts. You know what Bunker Hill is? The hill, not the battle. You know what the hill is? It's a drumlin, which is a hill carved out by glaciers. You ever been to Massachusetts? I have, been a while. Any glaciers up there right now? Not even close. Right? I mean, way up there, Alaska, Canada. Yeah, not Massachusetts. No glaciers anywhere near there. There were. And one of the things they did, 3 glaciers kind of passing each other, carved out this hill called Bunker Hill. There was an ice age. It was about 700 years. It did not ever cover the whole earth. So people can be like, well, how did Noah and them survive? Well, God didn't plant them there. They were in the Middle East. I personally know someone who thinks they've seen the ark from above. Not spiritually, like in a helicopter. But by the time they got down to the spot, very difficult area of the world, they couldn't find it. I don't know. I've heard a theory that, okay, you get off the boat, you need to build a house, and there's no real mature trees because of the flood. Where are you going to find wood? Well, the ark. Could Noah and his family have disassembled the ark and used the wood? Yeah. So would we ever find the ark? I don't know. I kind of think not. It's kind of cool to look at some of the things there. But again, God brought the flood, water on the earth. They were on the ark for a little over a year. Just some amazing things. You know, there are accounts from every ancient culture of some version of the flood. Not because they all, got together and tried to figure it out, or one culture read the other culture's writing. Those all independent. They all go back to Noah and his wife. We'll say we go back to Adam and Eve. We do. But we all go back to Noah and his wife as well. And their 3 sons and their wives. And you can trace all of that out if you want and do ancestry DNA and figure out where you come from and all of that. God's got a plan. It's all good. But let me share just one more evidence. Did I skip one picture, Mr. Glenn? Is there a mammoth picture? You go ahead and put that up. This is just cool. This is just one. I don't even know that one's real. But during the Ice Age, There were mammoths, woolly mammoths. Anybody wish they were still alive? There were woolly mammoths that got flash frozen. They got frozen so fast, some of them have food in their mouth, like grass. And the grass is still preserved. Yeah, it's kind of gross. Hey, there were grosser pictures. I think this one's fake. There were some that was real little baby mammoth. I figured I wouldn't leave those up there. But the simple fact of the matter is it did happen. And there's even references in the book of Job to the Ice Age, I believe. Anyway, so much we could look at. Well, let's end with just a couple thoughts. I think it's an absolute miracle that God didn't give up on us all. Genesis 8, starting in verse 1. And God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark. And God made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. God didn't ever forget Noah and his family, but God gave the earth kind of a restart. God gave them every opportunity to do the right thing, every opportunity to go forward in faith with him. Can you imagine a world where, yet again, everybody's a believer? There's only 8 people, but I believe they're all believers in God. They had that wonderful opportunity. God didn't just give them a restart, though. He gives us that opportunity as well. I think one of the most amazing things is the miracle of what God will do when even just one person follows God by faith. He used Noah in some pretty big ways, right? Maybe you're glad he doesn't want you to build an ark and, preach for 120 years. Anybody want to be toddling around 120 years from now, just firing away? I mean, maybe that'd be awesome. But he uses us in different ways. But when even just one person will follow him in faith, he'll do some amazing things through that person. It's Hebrews 11:7. We'll end with this verse. By faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith. Yes, there's a call in any sermon, any message, any digging into the flood. There's a call to salvation. They should have put their faith in God for eternity as well as faith in God to get on the ark. And we need to make sure our eternity is secure by having our faith in God. But there's a challenge for all of us. If you know you're a Christian, are you willing to be that one person who will live by faith? Not just for salvation, but live by faith for today. No matter what happens in the world, even if it's just you and 7 other people, just you and your family, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. We'll live by faith the way God says to, no matter what. Noah had to have decided something like that, right? He absolutely lived it out. Will we? Just one person, just 8 people, just one church, one family, whatever. Living by faith, God will do some amazing things. Let's pray. God, thank you for not giving up on all of humanity. Thank you for Noah and his family and their example. But thank you for using them. Thank you for offering salvation from the flood and eternal salvation to everyone that was on earth at that point. Thank you that salvation is available to all today through Jesus. And I pray for the lost. Maybe this Easter season we're thinking of a lot of people maybe in our lives that don't know you as Savior and trying to invite them to church at Easter, or just praying extra. Maybe they don't even live near here, and we're hoping they'll go to church somewhere or stumble across a live stream, even that morning or whatever. Maybe we're sharing our faith every chance we get. God, draw people to you and help them to respond. May we do our part to share, and may we do our job of living by faith no matter what anybody else does. We look forward to how you'll use it. In Jesus'